Everyone
Right.
concentrates to do coke afterwards. Where's your boyfriend?
Up. Let's mute ourselves, please. All right. All right, everybody. First of all, let's see your put your cameras on, show our speaker respect. That's how we do things in this class. So anyway, we are honored, you should be honored that we have today's special speaker, Tom Roach. He's working at Jellyfish Agency now, in charge of branding. The agency's slogan is "We give brands and talents a platform to perform." Not only is Tom working at this new kind of forward-thinking agency, but he's worked at some of the best agencies in the world. He's been the winner of multiple marketing effectiveness awards. And he's worked alongside the rock star Les Burnett. And he's going to talk a little bit about that today, as well as his third age of effectiveness presentation is being looked at by students in my strategy class. He and Grace Kite, another rock star, put together this great presentation. He's going to share some of those insights with us. So without further ado, let me turn this over to Tom and take it away.
Thank you so much, Tom. Or should I call you Thomas?
Tom's fine. Tom's great.
We have two Toms in a room. What an introduction. Thank you. Yeah, I've been really lucky to work with Les and do some bits and pieces with Grace. They're all great. I thoroughly recommend you read their work. And today's talk, I'm going to cover various different bits and pieces, some stuff from Burnett and Field, so Les, some stuff that I did with Grace, which was really a reinterpretation of some of Les's work. And then there's a bit here about bothism, which is basically this concept of doing brand and performance or brand and sales activation together, not necessarily completely together in the same execution, but certainly in the same campaign and the same communications for a brand. And I'm going to talk about the sales funnel, which is it's a ubiquitous and annoying thing that in marketing we just have to accept. And I was a bit frustrated with it when I moved to Jellyfish, which is a kind of more of a digital agency. Having been in pure creative agencies, I was sort of suddenly everything was done through the lens of this damn funnel. And I didn't really understand why, and I had to kind of get my head around it. So it was a thing I wrote to try and understand what this funnel is really about and whether it's right or not. And I'll talk more about that. And it ends with a kind of reinterpretation of the funnel that seems to have stuck for people and seems to be something that, in fact, there was a report just out by an organization called WARC, W-A-R-C. It's called something like I'm going to forget the title, The CMO's Guide to Brand and Performance. And that's something, Tom, that I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I'll share it with you and you can share with the class because it's a really good piece. So I will, sorry, the lights have just gone off in the room that I'm in because I'm not moving and I'm in I'll try and, they will hopefully get back on. Anyway, this was a piece that I wrote called The Wrong and the Short of It. And it's on my blog and it may be worth having a look at. You might already have seen it because I know you've been directed to have a look at the blog, but really it was an article, an essay about the problems that come if you only do things in the short term, and indeed if you only do things for the long term. How do you get the best balance of the long and the short? And it's based on, and I can't recommend it highly enough, Les Burnett and Peter Field's book, The Long and the Short of It, which is 10 years old now, but is the kind of seminal work on how you do long and short together, and the fact that it's only through doing longer lasting long-term activity and short-term sales activation that you can get the very best sustainable, profitable growth for your brand or business. I won't go into too much detail on it, but it's basically short-term activation, promotional activity. A lot of what you see in digital advertising can give you a very short-term immediate response, quite a high return on investment. But as soon as you stop spending, you go back to your base sales. It doesn't necessarily build cumulatively over time. But it does give you a nice spike in sales that, you know, your CFO, if you're running a business, might be happy about. What you need to do instead of just that is to layer in brand building activity, which has a longer lasting impact, can drive your base sales up. And if you do those two things together, you get the best effects. So it's not either or, it's both. And actually, the thing that I always say is in the book, the long and the short of it, which is there on the left, it's the word "and" that is the most important thing. And you can see there are two charts on the right there, which if you go to the book, the long and the short of it, you'll see they're the kind of the things you see when you work in marketing, particularly in the UK, less so in the States, actually, where this work is less known. But you see those two charts all the time being used to justify brand building activity. And you often find within organizations a resistance to doing the brand building stuff because it's more expensive and we don't have budget and it's not going to get us sales for 6 to 12 to 18 months. And in the short term, we've got quarterly sales targets to hit. We've got to report to Wall Street this quarter or whatever it is. There's lots of pressures on businesses to nail the short term, and they forget about the long term. And there's lots of myths out there about the expense of brand building, or the fact that it doesn't work, or the fact that it's not going to pay back as much, or that it's not going to deliver our quarterly sales targets. And there's a kind of there's a temptation to always come back to the short term. That a lot of the kind of the tech bros on the West Coast, that all those kinds of often SaaS businesses, B2B businesses, where they're doing loads of performance activity. There's been I think a sort of a movement to dismiss brand building and the importance of brand, and in fact the importance of advertising, in favor of virality and just having a product. You get people like Jeff Bezos would say, advertising is a tax on having a poor product. And so lots of myths have grown up around the dangers of brand building that I think we're now having to unlearn. And one of the best examples actually is how Jeff Bezos himself at Amazon learned through their own data the power and importance of brand building. And now Amazon is not only a big performance advertiser for itself, but it's growing a really, really big advertising business. And it's probably one of the biggest brand advertising spenders on earth, including, often making Super Bowl ads. So they've kind of learned the hard way, the expensive way, but through their own data, that this stuff works, and to get it in combination is the answer. The chart on the bottom right there is which you can't really see, is worth having a look at. It's again Burnett and Field, and it's about the proportion of your budget that you should probably spend roughly on brand building versus performance or sales activation activity. And the rough rule of thumb that a lot of the data says is about 60-40, 60% brand, 40% sales activation or performance. It will vary from brand to brand, from category to category. Newer brands who are just starting up probably want to start 90% sales activation or performance, 10% brand, but definitely trying to get to some sort of balance. And as brands mature, they often then become more balanced in their approach. But there have been some pretty famous cases recently of brands getting the balance wrong. Airbnb went heavily performance and had to course correct. A brand I worked with in the UK, ASOS, they would say things like, "Oh, we don't believe in brand here," and they would spend way too much on performance and not enough on brand, and they learned the hard way. So you get these. Adidas was a famous example from 4 or 5 years ago. Nike had a problem recently where they were too performance focused. All sorts of other problems they had, but they're including that one. So it's a very, very easy trap, it seems, for businesses to fall into. This was actually, I'm just going to go back slightly. When I wrote that piece, The Wrong and the Short of It. Mark Ritson, who you may have heard of, I'm sure Tom, you're kind of probably a fan of his work. He shared this on LinkedIn, and then a guy called David Thomas on LinkedIn commented on it and said, this will become known as the development of the Bothism model, and it's subsequently become called Bothism. So this whole concept really is probably summed up by the title Bothism. And this was a reinterpretation of that zigzag chart that Les and Peter Field did, that Grace Kite and I put together to try and represent for some of these more performance-driven startup, scale-up brands who probably have never done any brand building activity, to try and persuade them of the dangers of not doing brand building, of what can happen. And so we described it as kind of this ramp period where a brand, a startup or a scale up, is growing, probably through some search activity, maybe some social, but probably quite heavily performance driven. And then there often comes a point where they get saturated in those channels and those platforms. The cost of doing that kind of advertising is getting more and more. That they may be plateauing in terms of the impact from that activity. And then they have to kind of think, how are we going to get our growth? Where's our next phase of growth going to come from? And so this, what we call the bump period, kicks in, where you're experimenting with different forms of brand building activity, and you're seeing success with it, and you'll see 2 or 3 different kinds of kind of things adding up to your longer term growth. So you get the short and long term effects of the campaigns that you're doing, those green teeth you're seeing there, and you see an increased efficiency in your performance activity. There's these kind of synergy effects where your performance activity can improve as a result of essentially having a more famous and known brand. So there you've got a kind of description, a sort of idealistic view of how it can work. And it was based on Grace's econometric modeling work and how she'd seen it in action. And when we presented this at different conferences and to different clients, people responded and said, yeah, I was on the performance plateau, we didn't know what to do. And then we did some brand building activity and we got ourselves off it. So it genuinely is how real brands have responded and said, that happened to us. So there's a whole bit we could talk about on how you get yourself off the performance plateau, which I won't get into, but there's a whole kind of mindset shift that has to happen. You have to re-educate yourself as a business. You may have leaders who are not bought into brand building. It's very often the case that organizations will say things like, oh no, we don't talk about brand here, we don't do brand here, it's a dirty word. And it's a really surprising thing when you first hear it, and you have to, I come across it almost every week as a company that will say, or a CMO that will say to me, yeah, I can't use the word brand, which is kind of remarkable, by which they mean brand building investment. And even Scott Galloway, he'll say things that are just plain wrong about, the era of branding is dead, brand doesn't work. And you have to be really careful you don't listen to him too much on that subject. He's brilliant in all sorts of other ways, but he's weirdly wrong when it comes to this topic. So moving on to this concept of the funnel and thinking about how, because if we're thinking about what I've basically described as sort of 2 core roles for communication: a brand building role, so building brand equity, building memories for in people's heads, and then activating those memories. There's kind of two basic roles for communication there. But when you look up, if you do a Google image search for sales funnel, you get all these very samey kind of images. Most of them, there's a kind of core one that has 3 layers in it, which we'll come on to. And then loads of them have like 5, 6, 7, 8 different layers in, it gets really complicated and confusing. And everyone tries to add new layers and call them a different thing and have a different verb to describe each layer. But the basic construct is awareness, consideration, conversion. And as I said, when I joined Jellyfish, I was suddenly kind of confronted with this thing that I hadn't really seen much of in the creative agencies I'd worked in. The kind of traditional creative agency world doesn't really think about this in this way. they tend to think in ideas, or they think in kind of ecosystems. But this idea of forcing people through a funnel is an odd concept, and it's more used by the platforms in the kind of digital world. And this was something I wrote this piece about this concept. That I write in a magazine called Marketing Week in the UK, and the editor will say, "Oh, can you write about the funnel or brand purpose or something?" And often I say, "Well, I don't want to write about that because everyone's written about it. There's nothing new to say." Because, well, it's actually really good for SEO if you could write about the funnel. So I wrote this article to basically to drive traffic for the magazine, because it's good for their SEO. But as I got into the topic when I was researching it, it's kind of remarkable how resilient this concept of the funnel has been. It's now over a century old. It's 120 odd years old, actually, at its core, which is why I call it the cockroach of marketing concepts. It's actually it's been there for quite a long time, and it doesn't seem to want to go away. People often try and kill it. They'll write things about, oh, it's dead. And they'll introduce some new concept or new shape. But I thought, actually, it's not going anywhere. You can see just by doing a Google image search just how ubiquitous it's become, and it is everywhere in marketing, and particularly digital marketing today. But it is based on, or starts, the initial kind of roots of it are evident in this thing from 1898, the AIDA model, which maybe you've seen in some of your work so far on the course. In attention, interest, desire, and then conviction, you can see there, not conversion. And by this guy, American guy, St. Elmo Lewis, he was a door-to-door salesperson. So he was teaching people how to do door-to-door sales. And it was a kind of model to teach salespeople how to have a conversation door-to-door. You're knocking on a door, you're selling encyclopedias or whatever it is. And you need to get people's attention. You need to then give them something to give them more interest. Then you need to give them more information to create desire. And then by the end of the conversation, you want them to have conviction. So it's a way of framing a single conversation to get the best result. And then the metaphor of the funnel was overlaid onto this concept by a guy called William Townsend in 1924. And he wrote in this book about bond salesmanship, so selling bonds to people. And I can only assume this was like at the birth of the telephone. So he's thinking about how do you sell people in cold calling, similar kind of concept, picking up the phone. And he describes this concept of forcing facts through a funnel to produce a specific and favorable consideration of one fact. So again, it's about salesmanship. It's about teaching salespeople how to sell, which isn't necessarily like what we should be basing our marketing on. This is people 100 years ago teaching each other how to sell. And it's brand building is not just selling, it's something different from that. So it got me thinking, okay, this is interesting that this is quite old and it's kind of been around, but it seems a bit dangerous that it's really about selling. And then if you we need to update this from 21, but if you look at when this is Google Trends data on its recent rise to ubiquity, it starts really kicking off in around kind of 2011, 2012, 13, 14. So there's something happens in the 2010s. And I think it's the rise of digital advertising and all the platforms trying to organize themselves around how they sell their inventory to brands, to agencies, to the media world. And that's, I think, really what happens is Google and Meta latch onto this concept of the funnel to help them organize the ad inventory that they are trying to sell to clients and customers. So essentially, the funnel is a sales tool. It's not customer-led. It's not evidence-based. It's not based in marketing science that we now have some of, that they didn't have any of back then. And actually, I think it's a surprisingly inaccurate model of how advertising, and particularly brand building advertising, actually works. And I'll come on to some common things people have said about it. So every couple of years, somebody else will come up with a new shape, a new model, and a new critique of it, and try and improve it. And I guess in a way, I'm sort of one of those. McKinsey did one where they called the loyalty loop, which is basically a kind of endless Kafkaesque cycle of people considering you being triggered into a market, considering a bunch of products, evaluating and information gathering and shopping, and then having a moment of purchase, and then going back through their post-purchase experience, this kind of endless loop, which in some ways is accurate, but is a bit depressing because it's like we're constantly on this horrible cycle of constantly considering and consuming products and evaluating them. I think they probably, like McKinsey would, put too much emphasis on a world where people are evaluating things and gathering information. Most buying is not done on a rational basis. People are not looking at every single product that's available, assessing whether each of those meets their needs. That's a system 2 way of thinking. I don't know if you know about system 1, system 2, you will I'm sure learn about it. People's buying is much more instinctive and automatic than this. Another criticism that often gets leveled at the funnel is that real consumer journeys are not linear at all. And this is a really lovely diagram by, I think he's a US marketing guy called Doug Garnett, who, Tom, you probably, I don't know if you're familiar with his work. Lovely representation of this kind of wiggly kind of journey. You might bump into bits of communication on the way, but it's incredibly non-linear and random and hard to predict. And that's, I think, a really good kind of random representation of the truth of it, but of course impossible to use if you're a brand or if you're a marketer. It's not a practical tool, but it's a good description of the reality of the world, I think. This was a concept by somebody called James Hankins, who is also one of these Brits who writes a lot of stuff about all this stuff. He came up with this thing that he calls the Hankins hexagon. And it's, again, I think it's really interesting improvement because it represents one of the good things about it. It has this moment, like he calls it passive assimilation. Most of the time you're out of the market, 95% of the time you're out of the market probably, and then you get triggered into it, and then you might kind of ping pong around like a pinball ball, and so it kind of represents, again, the randomness. It's not linear, but tries to organize it. I think it's really good. My problem with it in practice is you still have to kind of reorganize the layers to try and use it, to try and think about, okay, for each stage, how are we going to communicate? What's the right thing to say to people at that different moment? And you do still end up, like, you can imagine turning each of those 6 things into an Excel spreadsheet and trying to assign a role for communications at that stage and a particular kind of messaging at that stage that's going to be appropriate and relevant for your audience. So you still need to kind of reorganize it. It's a good simulation, but it's not, again, not that practical. This was something that Google did in a really interesting, brilliant piece of research they did called the messy middle, which is kind of interesting for me because it doesn't say anything about the passive assimilation phase, and it doesn't say anything about the sales or post-sales experience. All it does is it talks about the thing that Google know a lot about, which is that messy middle where people are searching and looking for information and evaluating things and looking for reviews, comparing things. So again, it's a bit like the McKinsey thing. It probably, because it's made by Google, who know loads of stuff about a particular moment, but not very much about other moments. It emphasizes the kind of purchase moment, the purchase experience, and the research that people might be doing in certain categories. So again, it's not a perfect description of the world because most brands, most categories, people don't go through all of this kind of research. But again, it's a reflection of the fact that all these things are models. All models are wrong. Some are useful. Anybody that's making a map, and these are basically maps in history, has always described the world from its own point of view. You look at a 16th century map of the Holy Land, or the world, and you've got the Holy Land at the center. You've got Jerusalem at the center of it. Anybody writing maps always puts themselves at the center, and you can see Google at the center of this and nobody else. When you ask, and I did ask Byron Sharp, you may have heard of by now, who's a great, he's like probably one of the like 3 or 4 most important marketing professors in the world alongside your own. He doesn't believe in the funnel at all. He doesn't think it's a value. And it's really interesting. I mean, he talks about, most people are out of the market. They then are triggered and they fall into the market. So he doesn't see value in trying to delineate different stages. And I think in some ways that's right. You can't force people. You can't. This idea that you force people through a funnel is nonsense. He just sees people out of the market and then people buying who've fallen into the market. I'm not sure it's a very idealistic point of view. It's not a very useful one. It's the sort of it's the luxury of a marketing professor to be able to have a view like that. It doesn't help brands or marketing people organize themselves. It doesn't help them brief their marketing agencies, their creative agencies, their media agencies. It's not a piece of it's not an idea that is helpful to any of the practical things that we have to do when we're designing brand marketing. But it's probably true if we were so there's kind of a whole load of issues, and I've got some specific issues with this awareness, consideration, conversion that I'm going to cover now. So awareness, it's a really, really blunt thing to say. It's necessary to be aware, normally necessary to be aware of something before you buy it, but it's not a sufficient description of what's going on at that stage. There's a number of other things you need to do to create this concept called mental availability, which this is a core principle of Byron Sharp's work. Mental availability is a combination of things. It's bigger than awareness. It's to do with salience. It's to do with, does your brand come to mind spontaneously when you're in a buying or decision-making moment? So if I'm looking to book a holiday, which brand comes into mind? Is it Airbnb? Is it Booking? Is it Expedia? Is it hotels.com? Is it wherever? The brands that win at that have a number of things, and it's not just awareness. Are they associated with relevant needs? Are they associated with something called category entry points, which we'll talk about in a sec? Do they have sticky hooks in the mind, like brand ideas and a brand name that's powerful and an identity that's powerful? So really strong brands have all of those things, and it's all bundled together in this concept called mental availability, which is essentially the memories and associations that are in people's minds about you. So the strongest brands come to mind first in decision-making moments. So the core task of brand building is to build and refresh memory structures, to make them easy to mind, easy to find. That's pure Byron Sharp. I won't go into detail on this, but this is category entry points, and the work of the Ehrenberg Bass Institute and Byron Sharp, and particularly somebody called Jenny Romaniuk. Category entry points are the occasions and moments in consumers' lives when a brand could come to mind for them. And every brand will have a different set, or every category will have a different set. And this is a tool to help you kind of unpick and delineate what your category entry points or CEPs might be for any given brand. So there's a list of questions that can help you. It's remarkably unused as a concept by real marketing people. Some get it and use it, and many don't. Bigger brands tend to have a stronger associations with more category entry points. So a really weak small brand will have very few. A big brand will have many. So 6 or more for State Farm up there. It's doing pretty well. The other core concept that's kind of wrapped up in mental availability is distinctive brand assets. Powerful tools in helping brands come to mind. I should have removed the top right one there. I hadn't political sensitivities of using.
That's okay. He's our president now.
He's your president now.
Whoopee!
Remarkable how hair is for politicians in particular, hair seems to be one that comes up time and time again. So McDonald's have an incredibly rich array of them, from products to packaging, obviously the golden arches themselves, different characters. That's a brand that has built itself so brilliantly over decades. Since, was it 55? I think they've been going. They use their assets so well. They recombine them in different ways. And yeah, just a brilliant lesson in how to manage a brand through the use of distinctive brand assets. Apple has fewer, but is similarly great. Guinness in the UK has fewer, but very, very strong and powerful. And these things help you look like yourself as a brand. So distinctiveness is looking like yourself and not like others, so other people can easily identify that something is from your brand. The classic Coke bottle, the iconic Coke bottle, was designed as a result of a creative brief. I'm going to say it was 1910s, 1920s. The brief is probably the greatest creative brief ever written, and I'm going to get it wrong now, but it's something like, create a bottle so unique or so distinctive that it can be recognized even if recognized by touch, or even if it's lying broken on the ground. What a piece of poetry almost, but what a brilliant understanding of what is powerful for an iconic brand, to have something so recognizable that it can be recognized even if it's smashed to pieces. And we all recognize that that's true of the Coke bottle. So in neurological terms, a brand is an associative network. And this is a kind of representation of that. So a network of different things, ideas, visuals, concepts, category entry points, all these different memories and associations. And actually, there can be literally a physical thing in our brains, and a network of memories and associations, but of course different for every individual. So that's a problem with awareness. It's not enough. It's too blunt. Mental availability is a better, bigger concept that incorporates category entry points and distinctive brand assets. That's me kind of going, okay, awareness isn't enough. We'll have to reorganize what we mean at that stage. And then consideration. I find consideration's presence on all of these things. It's for some categories it's right, but for many other purchases, it's just not. It's not true. You don't need to go through a consideration phase to buy a McDonald's. You just go, I want a McDonald's. Oh, there's the golden arches. Let's turn off the highway. That's a system 2 reaction. It's not a consideration. It's not a heavily evaluated, thought through process. It just happens instinctively. And this is about system 1, system 2 thinking. System 1 thinking is how we do most of our behavior and decision making in life. It's quick, it's instinctive, little or no effort. We are very, very lazy human beings. We don't want to use much energy, and the brain uses remarkable amounts of energy and glucose. So we don't want to use it. We don't want to engage it. We have quick, instinctive systems that try and bypass any conscious thought. System 2 thinking is slower. It's conscious. It's effortful. A very small minority of our decision making is made that way. And so the Google way of thinking, that we're constant, and the McKinsey way, that we are constantly evaluating and considering things, it's just not true of most purchases. So instinctive system 1 processes govern our buying behavior, because we are we don't think of ourselves this way. We think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel, but biologically we are feeling creatures that think. And I'm going to do a little test here. So which brain scan shows someone choosing their favorite brand? Is it the left or the right?
You can put it in the comments. What is it, the left or the right? Which one is the brain engaged when you're choosing your favorite brand? Okay, I'm hearing there's a right one, there's a left one. Left. I see left. Looks
Okay.
like more people are going left.
More people are going left. Well, that's what people normally say, and they would be wrong. And it's because, so right is what's happening when someone's choosing their favorite brand. And this is because when you're choosing your favorite brand, you're doing it instinctively and automatically. You're not doing it in an effortful way that is going to light up a big part of the brain. And we choose the left when we ask this question. And marketers always choose left, by the way. This is not, you're not wrong, you know, you may be wrong, but you're not unusual for choosing left. We choose left because we're trained to think that brands are about creating fans and about creating brand love. And it's very, very common, even in like daily marketing practice, to hear really senior marketing people talk about, oh, we want to build brand love. We want to get people to love our products, and to think of them, and to kind of, you know, we want the brain to light up with a kind of with love when they see it. And that's just not how the world works. It's not how brands it's not how brands work. Brands are shorthands. Strong brands are no-brainers, not love marks. There's a book called Love Marks that I don't recommend you read, that I think was from like 2010, 2015 or something, it was the chairman or creative director at Saatchi & Saatchi globally, a guy called Kevin Roberts. And it's just bullshit. It's just not how brands work, really. They are not love marks. So strong brands are no-brainers. So my thinking here on the consideration thing is it's probably too rational for many brands and categories. It's probably does happen for some categories and brands, but let's not include it always in the center of our funnel. So it's too rational, assumes the importance of rational thinking. And then on to conversion. So conversion is it's a really strong word, conversion. And it implies that we think that advertising is a strong force. Well, it's not. Advertising is a really weak force, not a strong force. There have been debates for like a century about whether it's strong or weak, and mostly the marketing science, in fact, the marketing science says it's weak. It's a tiny, tiny little impact across millions of people lots of times, in adding up to something which can just influence and nudge a sale. It's not something that's going to hammer people over the head. It's not going to be something that forces you to buy. It does not convert you. And you know, the problem I think has come particularly recently, that the digital platforms like to convince us that ads on Google convert people. The conversion rate is this. The click-through rate is whatever. These ads. I mean, has anybody ever clicked on an ad and bought anything? I've not. You know, we all go through digital sales journeys, but actually clicking on a display ad and buying something, that's just not how it works. The average click-through rate on a display ad online is something like 0.06%. It's tiny. So why are we calling the bottom of this funnel conversion when 99.04% is not doing a conversion job? It's doing some other kind of job, some form of brand building, awareness, mental availability job, not a conversion job. Advertising works through nudging, not through bringing about Damascene experiences of conversion. Brilliant guy called Martin Weigel, who was Wyden and more recently BBDO. So conversion suggests advertising is a really strong thing. Another fact in this is around how search often plays a really different role from conversion. Search ads actually are more like signposts. They're more like, you know, I've already decided I'm going to buy a certain thing or a certain category. Search has helped guide me towards that thing, where I might explore it a bit. They're a navigational aid. They're more like a shop sign or a shop fascia. It's not about converting me. It's probably I've already decided, and I'm just using it to get to the destination, to get to the site to buy the thing. Another problem I see, and I've seen kind of in sort of daily practice, is that people tend to think that brand stuff happens at the top and performance stuff happens at the bottom. And that is a problem, I think, because it kind of tends to bifurcate and separate these two types of advertising communication. It puts them in different camps. It often then puts brand agencies in one place and performance activity in another, and can separate those two things out. and mean they're disconnected and not joined up as well as they should be. So that's another problem that I've seen. And also, people tend to think, oh, creative stuff happens at the top, and really boring things with words on and offers and discounts happen at the bottom. And I think that's also dangerous, because it underestimates the possibility that you can do creative things through this journey, through this funnel, at the bottom of the funnel. And it also underestimates the possibility that the brand activity can sell and can influence a sale, and can have a good return on investment, which is also true. So everything brands, everything sells in balance. Things at the top of the funnel will have a longer lasting memory impact, and things at the bottom of the funnel will have a bit more of a kind of harvesting impact, and convert that brand equity into something that could trigger a sale. They're not completely separate though. So some advertising is more about helping brands be easy to find than helping brands come easy to mind. At the top of the funnel, we're talking about easy to mind. Lower down the funnel, we're talking about helping them be easy to find. And I've talked about this. Search ads, digital display, and programmatic ads often act as navigational aids or signposts. And I don't know if you've thought or talked about different forms of evaluation and modeling and measurement, but there's a form called attribution modeling that can massively overestimate the impact of lower funnel advertising activity on sales. So search activity is more about physical availability and helping brands be easy to find than it is about helping brands be easy to mind. So physical and mental availability appearing, I think, and we can reorganize the funnel to reflect those two concepts. So an exercise I went through, having kind of studied it and thought about it, I was like, okay, we need a funnel that's going to, or modifications to the standard funnel that's going to better reflect the notion, the concept of building mental availability, not just awareness. Be better able to combine brand building and performance or sales activation. Acknowledge that there's a much greater emotional role for communication, and that's primary, it's not a rational thing. Acknowledge that actually probably most of the time we're nudging people, not converting them. And then also acknowledging that there's probably a distinct role for communications in helping people connect to the brands they already want. So navigating towards a brand, not like converting them. And so this was the modification to the standard awareness, consideration, conversion model: building, nudging, connecting. So build and refresh brand memories and associations amongst all future prospects to help the brand come to mind in decision or buying moments. So really about mental availability. And then nudging. So nudging the decisions of people who are in market, they've fallen into the market, and you want to hit them repeatedly with smaller messages that's going to refresh those memories that you've built elsewhere, and refresh those associations that you've built closer to the point of purchase. And then helping connect buyers to brands with simple navigational signposts that make them easy to find and easy to buy. So there you're thinking probably search activity and websites, etc. So building, nudging, and connecting, a reorganization and modification of the core funnel. People seem to use it. It seems to be practical. It's a simple enough modification on the existing one that it can map onto it. It doesn't scare the horses. And it's, whereas I think sometimes people try and get rid of the funnel altogether, but the reality is 80-90% of digital advertising is bought from and via Google and Meta, and they use a funnel, and we just have to kind of live with that. So I think some people at Google and Meta are beginning to use this, but I don't think it's completely changed their way of thinking. So that was my kind of reorganization of it. So really slightly different audience, different role for communication, different objective, and as you can imagine, probably different KPIs and metrics that you would employ at different stages. So more brand metrics at the top, where you can measure mental availability, and different kinds of behavioral metrics towards the bottom, where you're speaking to immediate prospects, many of whom may already have chosen your brand. And that's me done. But very, very open to questions. And that was, yeah, goodbye performance marketing, hello marketing performance was the kind of slogan at the end of that one. Shall I stop sharing? And then
yeah, stop sharing so we can see all our happy students' faces. Let me see if I can open this up there. All right. So we're opening this to questions. Anybody have a question for Tom? Here's your chance to speak to absolutely. I mean, the information that you just got, the long and short, bothism, funnel, fallacies and fixes, mental and physical availability, category entry points, distinctive brand assets, system one and system two, advertising is a weak force, brand performance. The gold that just was delivered on the platter to my students is outstanding. So does anybody have any questions about it? You might be just wiped out from all that truth that came from Tom today, shared with you through the slides and in the words he spoke. So does anybody have any questions? You can leave it in the chat. Right. Well, I have, we still have, everybody has the left, which brain, we got a lot of points in the chat, Tom, but it's all about the brain on the left or the brain on the right. Although, let's see, anybody have any questions? Somebody's got to have a question. They're very shy, Tom. This is typical of every semester.
Tom, do you have any questions?
Well, the thing about it is it okay with you if the students connect with you on LinkedIn and follow you that way? Is that okay?
Of course, yeah. And I'll share the slides. There may be other topics even that you're covering that I might have decks on that might be useful at some point. But yeah.
Okay, Gabby asks, looking back, what would you say is the most memorable part of your career?
Oh, okay. I hope that sounds like my career's over.
As far as so far, Tom. So far, Tom.
My favorite, what's the most memorable part? My best experiences have been with a couple of clients. McDonald's is my favorite client ever, I think, just for they just get it. They have the thing about McDonald's is they've got loads of money. So you can do loads of different things and everything is possible there in terms of, brand building, Super Bowl commercials through to great out of home campaigns, to all the kind of digital activations and things. Probably my most memorable experience though was with a brand called Sainsbury's in the UK, which is a grocery retailer. And they came to us with a problem. The business was declining, and they said they had a goal of over 3 years. They needed to increase sales by £2.5 billion in order to succeed, essentially. And we broke down that to 2.5 billion by going, okay, 2.5 billion over 3 years, divided by 52 weeks, divided by 14 million customers who were the weekly customer base at the time. Well, that equals £1.14. So what our goal actually isn't to sell £2.5 billion worth of stuff. Is to get every single shopper to buy £1.14's pennies more stuff each time they shop. So that broke down a really big, difficult goal into something really simple that we could then brief creative people with. So we said, okay, we think it's about getting customers to try something new. So buy some mint with your lamb, or buy some lemon with your cod, or put some nutmeg on your bolognese. And because it was about one item was £1.14, and it worked. We did a campaign all about inspiring people. Real shoppers have about 5 or 6 recipes that they routinely buy, and they get into ruts and they just get bored of the things they're shopping and buying all the time. So inspire them with inspiring food ideas, and we did a campaign about that, and it worked brilliantly, and was a kind of famous marketing success in the UK. So that's probably my most memorable experience.
Okay, we've got some more questions here. How about any advice you can offer to students starting out in their marketing careers?
God, I should have thought you'd ask something like that. I don't really. I think because the other thing is I'm not I don't really consider myself a marketer. I do talk about marketing, but I work in an agency, so I'm not client side. I think what advice? Try lots of different kinds of marketing. Don't get just sucked into one particular place or type of thing. The world of marketing is incredibly diverse with so many different things. And I think if you only did search ads, or if you only did a certain kind of brand, or if you only did social media, you could get siloed. I think try and experience a variety of different forms of marketing.
A student asked, you've held the job head of effectiveness at two companies. What does that job entail, and how does you determine you're doing it well?
Yeah. Okay. That's a great question. Head of not many agencies have that role, and mostly it's basically a title alongside the day job. The day job being a strategist in an agency, and the role of a strategist is to in a creative agency at least, is to work out what the problem is from the data and customer research, brief creative people to solve the problem with creative ideas, and then sell those ideas and make them happen. And the head of effectiveness is about making sure that you're measuring the campaigns correctly, and that you are, as an agency, writing up your case studies, proving the value of your work. And in particular in the UK, it can often mean entering a thing called the IPA Effectiveness Awards, which is a kind of gold standard when it comes to awards about effectiveness. Effectiveness are your campaigns achieving what you have set out to achieve? So it's basically doing the maths and the measurement to make sure that work is achieving its aims, and then writing up those case studies. And how I knew that I succeeded in that job at BBH, where I first held it, was that we won an award, which was the Effectiveness Company of the Year at the IPA Effectiveness Awards. So that was like the epitome of that.
That's impressive. All right, now, student asks, looking at the marketplace, is there any brand that you see that you think what they're doing is not a good idea? I know you mentioned Nike and some others.
Yeah.
Someone else that said, "Whoa, I don't like the way this looks." They bet they could make some changes. Is there anything come to mind?
It's very, very common to see brands that, particularly from where I'm sitting in a digital agency with a historical background in performance. And we don't actually here at Jellyfish, we haven't historically done many kind of fully integrated above the line campaigns. So we see lots of brands who are overly performance oriented. So I get them. Often you'll have a marketing director or a CMO at those kinds of brands saying to me, "Tom, can you come in and give a talk like the one I've just given, actually, about the importance of brand building, to persuade our CFO, our CEO of the importance of it, so they can pitch for more brand budget, and get the balance right." I'm doing that next week with Converse. They do too much.
Too much performance.
Too much performance.
Yeah,
Which is surprising. You wouldn't think that, but it's a problem that Adidas had, Nike had. It's weirdly common in the footwear world.
Now, a student who has started an internship with a minor league sports team. I'm also thinking of a small business. We work with these little tiny micro firms. Any suggestion on how those folks could grow their brand, grow their audience? The smaller companies have that double jeopardy working against them. Any thoughts on how like these smaller companies could succeed?
What category was it?
The student is working with a minor league sports team, like it's like a baseball team. But we work with clients that are little businesses in town. How do we grow with small brands, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I think it's a common misperception that somehow small brands need to do different things to big brands, because you think, oh, well, we don't have the money to be in certain channels. But for any brand at any size, in any category, there are ways to communicate. I think the common mistake for small brands is probably, well, it depends, but to not put enough budget into communication. maybe not have spent enough time really articulating and defining their brand proposition in a way that is distinctive. I think there are always ways to reach new customers, and probably getting a media professional, to think about the budgets you do have, and to plan those budgets in a really sensible way on multiple channels. Don't just stick it all on Google or stick it all on Facebook. Multiple channels is a good thing to do. Obviously not completely dissipating and fragmenting your spend. And I think but to be honest, the first thing to do is to speak to your audience, understand them, understand where, the kind of media they're using, understand their views about you, and really analyze your target audiences and their media behaviors, and also their brand, what they think about you as a brand. It's too easy in marketing to not talk to your consumers. Get out there and speak to them is probably the first thing to do.
Yeah, a desk is a dangerous place from which to view the world is one of my favorite quotes. All right, this will be the last question. We're coming down to about an hour. I have a student here who's a psychology marketing dual major. Wondering about the use of certainly behavioral science, as you share some of those great insights, is impactful. I know we talked about Cialdini's book, Psychology, the Influence of Persuasion. Any thoughts on psychology and marketing? Have you ever used it in any of your campaigns?
It's a funny thing, I mean, there's a kind of light touch of psychology, neuroscience in some of the things I talk about. I know you may come across Richard Shotton. His books are brilliant. Choice Factory, and there's another one that I can't remember. I find those things they're often post-rationalizations of interesting little experiments or little tactics that were deployed. The reality most of the time, when you're working with creative people to come up with ideas, it's hard to tell them to deploy certain behavioral tricks. You can't tell a creative person, oh, I read this thing about this company that put, what's the Schiphol Amsterdam airport, where they put flies in the toilets to help men aim straight. Those kinds of tricks, you can't tell a creative person to do those things. So they're often interesting descriptions of what's been done in the past, but I've never yet found useful applications of how you then apply those things. They seem to be really smart little tricks, probably helpful when you're designing a website to know where people's eyes are, and maybe some tricks on how the design of a homepage should look to be optimized. But when you're thinking about really big campaigns, I've not seen it to be helpful. But a basic understanding of humanity in terms of and of psychology in terms of, we are driven by desires of a certain kind, and wants and needs, and we are driven to flee certain negative things. Understanding the emotions, I think, is probably the most important thing.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to do what we always. First of all, I want to do this. I'm going to see if this works, because I want to try to bring everybody. I want to try to bring everybody into this picture here. Nope, that's not going to do it. Hey, all right, go back there, Tommy boy. Oh, what am I doing? Hey, no, I want to go that way. Hold on. Okay, all right. So I wanted to get everybody in here to do our famous thumbs up, saying goodbye as we click off and hang out or leave the meeting. All my students, as you go, I do want you to say thanks to Tom. By all means, we're going to reach out to him on LinkedIn. He's going to send some things for us to follow up that he discussed here. And that was fantastic, Tom. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise. It was a fantastic session. So people are putting in the comments, thank you, insightful, and have a great rest of your night. I know it's late over there. It's down dinner time. And students, have a good rest of your day, good rest of your week. And thanks again. Take care.
Thanks very much for having me.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Say thanks as you leave. All right.
Thank you.
Sweet. All right, thanks. All right. That was awesome, Tom. That was awesome. That was fantastic. Like I say, you covered, man, you gave them solid gold today. And so again, I want to thank you for doing that for my students. It was
Real pleasure.
outstanding. All right. We'll be in touch. And again, thanks
Cheers,
again.
Tom.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.